So welcome everyone to our final snow leopard webinar for 2020. This has been a very difficult year for many of us, and thank you all for your work for snow leopards and staying with us through this whole period. But we would like to end the year on a note of hope, and today highlight the growing number of snow leopard conservation success stories across the range. And today's webinar is focusing on a story of hope from Mongolia that has involved many people and taken place over many years. And we have the pleasure of welcoming two very special guests to this webinar. So first, I would like to introduce our main speaker, Baiera Agransaren. She's the director of the Snow Leopard Conservation Foundation in Mongolia, and she has had a remarkable career in snow leopard conservation. Baiera is one of the founders of many community-based conservation programs in Mongolia, including the Snow Leopard Enterprise Program, but she is perhaps best well known for her work in advocating for and helping establish the Tost Nature Reserve in the South Gobi. And Baiera has been and is still very much an inspiration to conservationists in Mongolia and across the world. And her story is equally so. So I'm so happy that she could come here and share it with us today. So welcome, Baiera, and thank you for joining us. We also are delighted to have our discussant here today for this webinar, Dr. Charu Mishra. I think I don't need to really introduce him to many of you because you've known him as our previous Snow Leopard Network ED. But just in case there are new members or non-SLN members, Charu is the ED for the International Snow Leopard Trust, and he's a distinguished scientist and conservationist. And many of you might have known him for having given a lot of thought to the ideas underpinning community-based conservations and actions in practice. And today he's here to bring in his experience from across the range and insights from his role as a passionate conservationist and advocate for snow leopards. So thank you, Charu, for also joining us today. So without any ado, let's get started. So as usual, our main speaker, Baiera, will present for around 20 to 30 minutes. We'll then turn to our discussant for reactions and further perspectives. But you may feel free throughout the talk, throughout the first discussant, to write any questions in the chat at any time, and we will aim to get to them during the discussion period. So yeah, without any ado, over to you, Baiera.
Thank you, Justine, for introducing me. And hello, everyone. So I will share my screen. So it's a great pleasure to be here with you all on the same platform tonight. Maybe for some of you, morning and day. I hope everyone is doing well under these circumstances with different way of living and working. Today, I will be telling a story of making Tost Mountain protected from the mines. So I know that all of you are aware that the rapid economic development is hindering wildlife around us. Today's story is exactly one of the examples as conservationists, what we had to deal and are still dealing with in order to protect wildlife. So you all here tonight at Snow Leopard Network members, almost 30 people, have your own unique experience in the skills, knowledge, and passion to contribute to safeguarding this beautiful creature. I hope my talk somewhat refreshes you and maybe inspire you a little. As a snow leopard conservationist working for more than 20 years, my participation in conservation work in Tost Mountain is definitely a significant one in my career and life, the way it has been teaching me of nature and the way I should be running the conservation.
Yeah, I was just going to say, no, great.
Just 3 months ago, I traveled to South Gobi to attend the opening ceremony of the brand new park administration office in Qorontisum. It's a very big achievement in terms of the local government, who have been ceaselessly working to set up this office, to get approval from provincial government, to raise startup funds to run the park and provide an office building. So the blessed day was picked up to open the new organization. Local monk attended to bless the building and ceremony. Local people were gathered and the ribbons were cut, and new staff members were very happy to receive their brand new computers, desks, especially the cake that was cut to share. It was quite a celebration. Tost Mountain is a home to 200 families, herding more than 15,000 livestock and being used for generations. Most recently, most percentage of the livestock are goats for their cashmere production, and there are camels, horses, sheep with less numbers. Mountain pasture is used throughout the seasons, and all families have their winter camp spots in the mountains. The Tost Mountains are part of the chain mountains of Gobi and quite unique habitat for snow leopard and rich in desert biodiversity. Snow leopard main prey animals are argali and ibex here. So since 2002, as Justine mentioned earlier, that we have been collaborating with these herders to raise conservation awareness and involve them into Snow Leopard Enterprises program, which offers income generation opportunities with herders making commitments to conservation. So in 2008, the first ever long-term ecological study was launched with the collaboration of Snow Leopard Trust, Ministry of Nature and Environment, and national and international NGOs in universities. More students are able to participate in the research. So 10 years of study has revealed more information about the use of cats, its prey in the ecosystem, which some of you may have already heard from our researchers like Dr. Oriane, Gustav, Justine, and Puji. With this program, our presence became more frequent. Local people were happy to share what they know about wildlife and their perceptions. So it was time when the study had already started having tangible information about home ranges of the cats in the mountain, which overlaps with herders' winter places and where conflict between human and wildlife exists. Just after a year of launching the program in the area, one of the colored cats named Baiera was killed by a herder who defended his livestock from the cats' multiple attempts to his corrals. So the incidents led us to start a livestock insurance program to mitigate the conflict in some extent. To set up the program, we had to travel more to Gobi and organize workshops and meetings with them. While doing so, we learned about mining developments in the area, which was quite alarming to us. So what we learned was entire county territory was given away to mines with more than 90 licenses. We didn't really know what to do at that time, but we quickly realized that retaliatory killing is not the major threat to cats as we perceived, but mining was. The good thing was that our research program was giving us some tangible information that helped us to raise awareness as why the area should not be mined. So after giving us some time to explore more about mines, we started talking with local government what protection status would needed. A suggestion by them was make it local protected area that they can make decisions. So it became a local protected area in 2010. We thought that it was a good achievement that time and habitat is safe. The local protected area status was given with conditions that existing mining licenses are forever expired once their duration is up, so that over the years the area would be free. Since it became local protected area, we watched closely about for 2 years, I think, but we learned that the mining licenses were not expiring. They staying there with different company names. We found companies were selling them to each other, which is illegal, but the new buyer's time was extended. So this was the when we realized that local protected area status was not enough protection. So we needed to make it a state protected area. So it took us some time to get familiar how system works to make state protected area and how system is working with mines. Since the land was given away to mines, we realized that it was a tough road ahead of us. Our approach to reach our goal of state protected area was generally focused on involving local people, to have legal support and collaborating with media. So creating these partnerships, getting all parties on the same page itself took time, as we ourselves were learning how to run campaigns and then how to get help from outside partners. I remember that even Charo was suggesting me to bring on legal support. Even Charo's suggestion took some time for me to accept due to our lack of knowledge and skills how to deal with this complex matter. However, we had really strong collaboration and relationship with local people through our conservation programs developed since 2002. As I mentioned earlier, they were the most important collaborators and backup for the campaign. With them, we focused on raising awareness why mines can't be in the area, what mines would do to their livelihoods and wildlife, as well as what legal and human rights these people have to protect their land, the land they depend on. So we engaged them in process of achievement and every challenges. So their participation and commitment were really huge, and it was quite inspiring and amazing. So their participation in later petitions, press conferences, high-level national media events improved their skills and capacity, we could easily see. I can't remember how many petitions, press conferences they were part of on this particular matter, but they learned how to campaign and lobby to influence decision makers. So they put an incredible amount of commitment into whole effort. They were able to put aside their livelihood chores and get together whenever they needed, which was really, really amazing commitment. At least 50 or 60 people had to arrive in a capital city of Mongolia, traveling 800 kilometers to present in front of decision makers. So the whole pace of the process was so unpredictable. There are times that you have to move very quickly, and then there are times that you have never know what will happen next. With all these cases, they were ready to cope. So it showed just how much they wanted to safeguard their land they depend on. With legal support, we were able to get advice about different aspects of the campaign. Legal awareness about mining, human rights, land laws were raised much more broadly among local people as well as the general public. Awareness raising on local people's rights and the responsibilities were very crucial. So there were a number of times that local people filed cases to court against mining companies and illegal decisions made by the government. In each case, the lawyers were helpful and they played an important role. They also worked to draft law resolutions to help decision makers to submit to parliament. in order to make it a state protected area. Media also played an important role for this campaign. Specifically, social media campaigns were impactful, and we learned politicians are responsive to media. We were able to create a collaboration with green journalism through all the platforms. So many news alerts, daily news articles, TV broadcastings, educational series, media field trips on the ground, organizing high-level media events that involved the politicians were very helpful to bring public attention as well as politicians itself. So media helped a lot to create a strong general voice, public voice against mines and for the conservation. So this road wasn't smooth. Of course, there are many setbacks and challenges we faced. With every attempt, we tried to have setbacks. We felt like we had a setbacks, but submitting something to cabinet meetings were itself a big project that had to be approved by each level of government, local, provincial, ministerial, and cabinet. So in these two cases, they were cabinet disapproved because for them, revoking all the mining licenses costly and not encouraging while the country's economy is demanding. So at these points, we had to look for other ways to find parliament member to help apply directly to parliament meetings, not through the cabinet. So finding like-minded members was tough for us. However, it took lots of time, but however, we were able to convince 2 women parliamentarians to apply the case to parliament. So generally the challenge is it took so much time and effort to get all parties on the same page. So each attempt, whether successful or unsuccessful, it was the learning experience for all of us and as well as the local communities. So every time I talk about Tost, I can't skip mentioning about my former staff member Sumbe, who lost his life during the campaign. It was a tremendous loss to all of us and to conservation of snow leopards. He lost his life under mysterious circumstances in November 2015. We have never known what happened to him. Probably I wouldn't know for the rest of my life. But his contribution to help create Tost was invaluable, and he was just a shining star among us. The tragedy paused us a bit in our campaign, but we realized that we had to continue fighting for his legacy, no matter what happened to him. The young snow leopard conservationists' life loss created a much stronger public outcry against mining to demand protection of Tost Mountain. So after 6 years of huge effort with failures and success, we finally had parliament approval. In April 2016, the Mongolian government declared Tost Mountain a nature reserve, which is the first nature reserve dedicated to snow leopards. At this stage, Parliament forwarded its order to cancel all mining licenses and identify boundaries of the protected area to Cabinet of Mongolia. So in March 2017, the Cabinet identified Tost's boundary following the order of Parliament with 7,430 square kilometers, which is huge territory, excluding the area with oasis where local people have grown their vegetables since 1970s. So the reason the government didn't include the area was there was an extraction license owned by the parliament member. But local people were not happy, and they decided to continue to fight on their own, which was pretty amazing. So it was such an amazing course of work when I watched them to grow into just like a lobby powerhouse. The way they networked with decision makers, the way they used media was amazing. We, of course, guided them and helped them a bit, but it was just, again, the herder woman community leaders whose picture is in the right corner of the screen in red, was able to mobilize her fellow local people for the campaign to expand Tost boundaries to include the oasis. So in September 2019, they reached their goal. The area with oasis included in the Tost Nature Reserve territory, making Nature Reserve 8,560 square kilometer territory protected. So now Tostumbo Nature Reserve locates between the Gobi Agransaren National Park, Great Gobi strictly protected area, which becomes an important corridor for wildlife. Tost Nature Reserve, along with Great Gobi Agransaren National Park and Ishbogd National Park, shapes the snow leopard South Gobi landscapes, which is huge territory of 88,000 square kilometers for snow leopards. But we all know that the snow leopards needs more land in order to survive. So this is one of the 3 snow leopard landscapes here in Mongolia. So Nature Reserve itself is located the southern edge of the country, about 70 kilometers away from Chinese border. Since 2016, since the park was declared, Snow Leopard Conservation Foundation with the Snow Leopard Trust have been supporting to build capacity of this brand new national park, developing management mechanisms, helping them to create the management plan for 5 years, delivering training to rangers and the staff members, and helping to build networks and partnerships with organizations like ministry itself and different conservation organizations. So since there is a great participation of local communities in conservation, we helped to build the capacity of volunteer rangers who are herders, while the park administration is being set up over the last 3 years. These 7 volunteer rangers were trained in patrolling and monitoring skills and carrying out the activities on a monthly basis. The collaborative management committee was established, which consists of representatives of different stakeholders of the nature reserve. The committee is an important part of the management system of the nature reserve. So during the course of work, there are important lessons as conservationists we learned. Threats to species are accelerating. It's approaching us really fast, so that we have to be proactive and resilient. Dealing with this kind of challenges, there are lots of setbacks and failures. So we should learn these setbacks and failures as opportunities to learn and influence. And for us, it's very important to create diverse allies to conservation so that we could impact in a broader landscape level for the conservation. And with this matter, we were able to get strategic support by every level of the government. You know, when there is challenges and setbacks, there's always ways to move forward. So it's important not to giving up. I have just told a story, an incredible achievement reached by many individuals and organizations. My dear team at Snow Leopard Conservation Foundation, 90% of women, gone through this incredible 6-7 years of hard work and tireless effort. They are just amazing ladies. I'm so proud of them. It was just not possible without snow leopard teams in support, guidance, and willingness. They were amazing backups for us. So there are many local level government authorities who listened to us and accepted the scientific knowledge of why these cats need the land and felt the pressure of the herders. So many multi-level ministerial and parliament level staff members helped guide us the way as how to reach their bosses for us. Civil society in human rights organizations, journalists, scientists, and researchers who joined us for the cause of protecting the habitat for snow leopards and local people. So there is a Mongolian proverb saying, efforts of many is enormous as the ocean. So yeah, it was without so many individuals and organizations' help, we couldn't have achieved this. So thank you everyone for listening and Happy New Year ahead.
Thank you, Baiera, for sharing this ray of hope and giving us an appreciation of what the challenges were and how your team dealt with them. I'm sure we have many questions. So everyone who's here today, please feel free to write in the chat. This is a great opportunity to directly ask questions to Baiera and Charu about this work. But before we go to the questions, but please have them coming through, we would like to first turn to Charu. And Charu, you've been really part of this wider effort in Mongolia, supporting the team over the last decade. And we'd like to know, how did you perceive what was happening in Tost and the important learnings that, like Baiera just mentioned? But what important learnings do you take away from this experience? And are there important lessons from other contexts that you would like to share?
Sure. Thanks, Justine. Thanks, everyone, for being here and for inviting me today. Yeah, I do not know if I can add much to this amazingly inspiring and eloquent story that Baiera has told us. But Justine, maybe I reiterate some of the things that Baiera mentioned in the passing, but there's a lot that happened in those years and a lot we learned. And for example, one of the things we learned was that I still remember that trip, by the way, that Baiera mentioned when we were doing this insurance, trying to set up the insurance program in Mongolia, which is when the first in Tost, which is when the first time we learned about mining and exploration and things like that. And we came back and went to the offices in Ulaanbaatar to actually get more information. That's when we realized that that entire area is actually completely covered with mining licenses. So, and this is an area where we'd already actually started. We had been working for more than a year, and and much longer. If you look at the snow leopard enterprises and the community work that was being done. So, I guess one of the important lessons there was that these conservation problems just creep up on you, without realizing, and which is where like Baiera mentioned, it's really really important to have one's ear close to the ground. Because and you can trace this back. We should have in retrospect, in hindsight, we should have anticipated this, because it was just a few years back that Mongolia actually had rationalized their mining policies, and laws surrounding mining made it much more attractive for investments in the mining sector, etc. So these were in hindsight, we should have expected these kind of challenges. So we sort of caught unawares, like we often are as conservationists. And I think that was really one important lesson. The other one was the work. It's important to understand that the work to protect those mountains from mining actually started much, much before we ever thought mining was a problem. It was really, the years, that bedrock of community relationships that Baiera and her team had established, that really sort of, I think, played a very critical role in being able to help protect protect that area. We did not have to, how do you say, invest time and effort into building community relationships with the community. There's already strong relationships. There was trust, and therefore, we already had a head start there. Baiera makes it, with her typical humility, she makes it all sound so simple, but this was a period of stress, I can tell you. I mean, and the way this amazing group of women, Baiera and her team, the way they handle that pressure and that stress, is just absolutely, absolutely remarkable, because this was consistent. They had, this was, I don't want to go into the details, but they had phone calls, they had people visiting them in their offices and so on, trying to persuade them to, change their stand, to, to let Tost be mined, etc. All kinds of pressure on them, which they were amazing grit with which they actually withstood those pressures and continued on this journey. And like Baiera said, never give up. But even before never give up, I think one of the important lessons in this case was, sometimes you just have to set yourself audacious goals. And nobody, most people, maybe even very close colleagues, did not give this effort much of a chance when Baiera and her team started this fight to protect Tost, because it's just because of the huge sort of economic interests that were involved, the kind of powers that were involved, and so on. So sometimes it just, to persevere, to set yourself audacious goals and to persevere, things do work out. But as most of our listeners know, in conservation, many things need to align. It's not, had Baiera, not received, and the team not received eventually that support from the Hural, from the parliament, this would have been a different story, because ultimately that's what made the difference. But it didn't just happen, right? But we tried 3 or 4 times before the application was presented to the parliament. Each time it was shelved. So this to set up the nature reserve. So this was repeated effort. The important thing was Baiera did not, and the team did not stop their efforts. And like she said, we just kept on trying to improve. If the policy makers or lawmakers were not convinced with the kind of language that was there in the applications, having legal support helped. We had an amazing lawyer, committed lawyer, who's working with us to draft these things in better legal language and so on. But there's just so many things, like she mentioned, Sumbe's passing away. That again mobilized people a lot. Baiera's efforts with the media, politicians, taking people to Tost. So this continued over a long period of time. And so a lot of things had to, we were very fortunate that eventually these things came together. They aligned well. The next year, Mongolia was going to go into elections just a few months later, and this became a political issue. And then finally this happened. So it would not have happened had Baiera and team not tried or given up along the way or whatever. So, you need to just persist. And eventually, if we are fortunate, circumstances align and good things do happen. So yeah, it's been quite an incredible journey where, I have basically been only there from a distance to support Baiera and her team wherever they needed support. But it's just been such a fascinating journey of learning from me. It's long distance learning mostly, but I have learned so much about conservation from this experience that, it's been quite enriching.
Thank you, Charu. No, that's it's good to hear also, to hear that your thoughts from far away, these and seeing this go through, and the grit you guys must have also had seeing and supporting Baiera, because we didn't want to lose Baiera and her team in itself, right? So you had to keep them together too. And just before we go to the chat and the questions, Baiera, you mentioned that this is an ongoing process, and I just wanted to ask what challenges still lie ahead. Because we know that in Mongolia, mining is ever-growing economic reality. And will the same issues keep coming to Tost and other places? Just a quick question related to that, and then we'll go to the audience.
Yeah, I think that mining threats are still there. We have a nature reserve boundaries identified, nature reserve set up, but many other national parks in Mongolia had to deal with the illegal mines, So that's why we need to help the national park, help them to build their capacity so that they are better performing against any illegal mines.
Thanks, Baiera. Okay, so we have quite a few questions that have come in. So both Charu and Baiera, feel free to comment on these. There's one first question from Becky May, and she's asking, what do you feel finally influenced the cabinet to declare Tost as a nature reserve and then a national park? Is it the strength and the size of the local voice? Was it getting a certain influence of influential individuals on your side? Was it a combination of the importance of the area of wildlife or the human land rights aspects that helped us declare it finally? So I think Charu answered some of this question in his recent comment, but I wondered if Baiera or Charu, you had anything to add specifically to this?
Yeah, it just took us so long time for us to do this. Now I just feel like we were just putting puzzles together to make the land to be protected, We just had to find the puzzles representing the decision makers, We needed the puzzles to, bring the public to know about this cause. So that's why I'm saying, bringing all these parties to put in one spot really takes time. So it is just, as only Snow Leopard Conservation Foundation couldn't have achieved this, as just single organization. So it has to build all these partnerships to create. Along the way, things lined up, as Charu says, there are just day comes in to everything. Puzzle is completed. So.
Thanks, Charu. Anything else to add to that?
No, Justine, I mean, I think, Becky, it's like Baiera just said, the various pieces of the puzzle. And it's like, I've been asked this question before, by the way, that, what was the single most important thing? And I don't believe there was one single most important thing apart from the determination and grit of Baiera and her team. But ultimately, it took a lot of these puzzles to fall in place, and it just happened, in one day, and everything came together.
Thanks. Yeah, so it's hard. We just have to find all those puzzle pieces, a difficult challenge. And another question from John Farrington. He's asking, he has two questions, but the first one is, who was your legal support? So more detail, if there is any, Baiera, on what was this legal support you were able to get throughout the process?
So, yeah, we were lucky to find the lawyer who has been helping to develop the laws against mines, laws that protect the river and the river banks in Mongolia. So he already had this great experience and the skills, so that we were approached by this lawyer whose name is Dashka. So he was very important for us to guide through how move things forward in terms of the legal environment.
Thanks. And the second question is, were mining companies compensated for having their licenses extinguished or otherwise offered another incentive?
I think they did compensated. Government must have compensated them, but we were not in a part of that process. So since it was declared 2016, for government, it took government a couple of years to compensate, to deal with those mining licenses. And then after they all compensated, removed, and then that was the 2000. Yeah, that was the boundary finally identified.
Great. And actually, John has a third question. What type of mineral resources were the mining companies finding in Tost? for
Yeah, Tost is rich with coal mines, and it's very close to the Chinese border, so it's easier, logistically easier. So even the eastern part of the Gobi, there is a long ways of coal deposits in the Gobi. So in that area, it was mostly coal. But you know, the Tost, the name of that mountain is, if you translate into English, it's called Oily Mountains. It would look like oily, in the sun. But I think there are other natural resources like actual oil underground. So by the time when we're reached to protect this land, we see that there are oils in the Tost, but oils won't be approached. It was only they were only concentrating into the mining of coal.
Thanks. And another question from Oliver, who's saying, I mean, you've had many other people have written, by the way, amazing story and such an inspiration, Baiera, in the chat, and I'll let you and Charu look at them separately. But Oliver has a question wondering if you could tell us a bit more about how local communities feed into the management of the nature reserve today and what role they have in decision-making. You mentioned a committee and how it interacts with the park authorities.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have this long history of collaborating with the local communities. Now the protected area is collaborating with the local herder organizations, and each organization has their own responsible areas that they can patrol. So there are 7 community organizations exist in Tost. So each community has their own volunteer rangers, which I mentioned in my presentation. So they patrol the area, make sure everything is okay, or they collect data to learn more about their land. So as I mentioned, the collaborative management committee. So these 7 community herder organizations are the important stakeholders of the national park. So they now later on organize themselves as like coalition organizations. So coalition representatives of the coalition of these herder organizations are now sitting in the collaborative management committee. So collaborative management committee is, in other words, like board of the nature reserve. So this group of people now we as Snow Leopard Conservation Foundation is one of the members of that management committee. So through these representatives, they would be participating in the management of Tost. The land is being used by these local people, so they are the important players of the management.
Thanks, Baiera. Charu, do you want to add anything related? No, but the next question is for both, I think Charu and Baiera can comment on, is again from Becky. She asks if the Snow Leopard Foundation aims to have a permanent presence in this area, or do you tend to reduce your involvement, support in the area with the local communities over time? How do you feel about thinking about the future of this area in general? So maybe first we'll go to Baiera and then we'll go to Charu.
So Snow Leopard Conservation Foundation, we're trying to operate our organizations in landscape level. So we see Tost Nature Reserve as part of the South Gobi landscape. So it is, that we are small organizations. We can't reach out every territory of snow leopards. But for us, our philosophy was like, creating ownership, any conservation programs to the local level. So I think we are doing a fine job with that. So For example, livestock insurance program, the 7 communities are part of this. Our participation is not significant there for now, but anytime the local communities need us, we can be there to assist. But with our presence, since long-term ecological study is present in that area, usually there are somebody, for example, Orion and Gustav, leading the calling work there, or Puji and other students are conducting IBEX surveys, and these volunteer rangers are part of these surveys. So there's always something is going on, but we do really, focus on creating local communities' ownership of any program.
Thank you. Over to Charu.
Yeah, if I might just add on to what Baiera said, I think that one of our really something that we believe in very strongly and practice is really long-term engagement with sites, with communities that live there, and with issues. So, of course, like Baiera said, in terms of the conservation interventions that we have, the desire is always to make them as self-sustaining as possible, to empower communities, to empower local stakeholders to the extent possible. But at the same time, on the flip side, we have this very strong belief, just like setting up a protected area. You don't just set it up and walk away, right? You have to manage it for lifelong. And similarly with conservation and the kind of conservation we try to do with communities, these are lifelong commitments. And it's important to also keep in mind that it's never static, right? Things keep changing. Both the opportunities for conservation on the ground, but also challenges. Like Baiera said, even mining has not gone away completely as a threat. Tomorrow there might be something else, and so really continuing to engage with communities, continuing to engage with places, we believe is really critical for effective conservation. So I definitely hope that our engagement in Tost, as indeed in other landscapes that we work in, is going to stay long-term, lifelong, whatever you might want to call it.
Thanks, both. That well explains the vision, ever-changing vision, but support to the local communities. And this draws on this next question from Anthony, who's asking if community rangers at Tost are using the smart tools for recording threats and wildlife. So that, maybe to add to this question, maybe Baiera and Charu can comment on what other threats might be in the landscape that maybe we're constantly trying to assess over time. So maybe first to Charu and then to Baiera. Should we just change it up a little bit?
I think this could go to Baiera.
Okay, great. Go Baiera.
So our staff member, the program manager of research and monitoring, Puji, who might be hearing.
Baiera, your sound, something happened. Maybe something on your mic.
Okay. How is it now?
Some feedback. Better. Now it's great.
So we have been delivering trainings and workshops how to use smart systems by our research monitoring program manager Puji to these rangers in Tost. But we would be also giving more capacity building interventions to this new protected area team. So from the beginning, we have started gathering the information that they used through this program. And I think there are still, because the Tost is very close to the Chinese border, it is also lots of traffic, people carrying, companies carrying coal to China. So there are lots of outside people, and then there might be, illegal activities could be happening. So besides the retaliatory killing is something that we have already, worked with communities. And I think that the illegal activities and then also lack of capacity as Tost being brand new national park, we just have to, develop their capacity. So Tost Nature Reserve is brand new national park, as well as this nature reserve status is not funded by the state. So they are funded by the local government, which is, funding is always limitation out there. So I think that right now the challenge is threats to snow leopards could be, lack of capacity in the area in terms of the running national park.
Thank you, Baiera. Charo, do you have any additions to add to other maybe emerging threats in Tost or other areas of the range that maybe we should be keeping an eye out for?
Justine, I mean, first, I think as far as the as far as the threats specific to Tost are concerned and their monitoring, I think Baiera has addressed that already. I did want to add that, one of our other, not just in Tost, but all the landscapes that we work in, I think one of our priorities, recent priorities, has been to really try and understand and evaluate and measure the effectiveness of the programs that we run there. And Justine, you have been leading that effort. So I think I just wanted to mention that in addition to monitoring of threats, I think it's really critical that we are able to monitor and evaluate and learn from those evaluations how to improve our community-based conservation or any conservation programs for that matter. And that applies to Tost as well. And hopefully, now the results are starting to trickle in, and which is really fantastic. As far as other threats are concerned, I mean, we all know, I don't have to say much, but apart from these kind of the traditional threats in terms of, retaliatory killing, and like some of the newer ones which come with, these pressures of economic development, like mining, infrastructure development, opening up of relatively remote areas, which were sort of naturally, in some sense, protected from these kind of pressures even a few decades ago. So those are some of the obvious ones. Everyone's concerned increasingly about disease with changing climate, with global warming, and the globalization, the unprecedented levels of movements of people and goods between places. Definitely this new, definitely the threat of disease. So yeah, it's as we all know, it's a sort of a constant kind of the whole landscape of threats is just so dynamic and changing all the time. And I think that's a big challenge for us as conservationists to just sort of keep up with them, or maybe stay ahead of the curve and try and anticipate some of those threats and do a better job of addressing them. And part of it, of course, comes from research. And I just want to reiterate, something that Baiera said, that one of the things amongst the various pieces of the puzzle, the fact was that we were beginning to get good information, even, way back in 2010, about Tost and its potential importance for conservation, for snow leopards and for other species. And so we could speak with, the team could speak with a lot of authority and, credibility about the importance of those areas. And that definitely also helped. So, I like so part of the, better understanding of threats is just simply being able to have the research and monitoring in place on the ground, even before these things become a problem, right? So we are better able to catch them during the early stages as new threats are coming in. So yeah, it's just being alive to those threats, not just at a local level, but like I noticed one of Kostub's questions as well about the larger the role of governments and things like that. Just building those partnerships. I think trying to understand as conservationists what are our economic policies over the next 10 or 20 years, what are the priorities of the government, and how I'm not saying that they will only lead to more threats, but also there are potential opportunities which we can find in them. But definitely from a threats understanding of threats perspective, I think it's important to be looking at those not so much locally, but looking at sort of national and even global priorities, and how those are changing for governments, and those also do help us in being able to anticipate some of these threats as well as opportunities for conservation.
Thank you, Charu. No, and it's great to bring up Kustub's comment. It's actually quite a long comment, so I wouldn't mind if Kustub actually asked Baiera his question directly. I think it was a question directed to Baiera. Kustub, if you are there, do you mind using your mic to ask her? And then we will take Nikki's last question before we wrap up for the final. Go ahead, Kustub.
Hi, Justine. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I tried to make it short, but see, didn't have time. Okay, so the question which I really wanted to, it's more of a comment, come a question. I think as Charu mentioned, we conservationists are always caught off guard with development or mining projects, or a bridge coming up or a dam coming up or something. Now, what it also highlights is that the need to engage more closely with government agencies and a wide variety of ministries, departments. Sometimes a ministry which may have nothing to do with the Ministry of Nature or an Environment, for instance. So I understand, Baiera, you and your team are taking those how do we say, preventive, or those scoping actions already, trying to explore what's going on. But it just wanted you to please give some suggestions on how do we stay ahead of the curve, that we don't keep hitting ourselves against, oh, there is a big threat coming up and it's already at an advanced stage, and then we have to firefight. So basically, what best can be done to minimize firefighting, but get more proactive in working in a way that we don't end up in a difficult situation of firefighting. I know it may not always be possible, or it might be a utopian dream, but still, I think we can get close to it if possible.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Baiera.
Yeah, I think, this is actually one of the lessons we learned while going through this course of work. Just being proactive is really important, because, all this economic development, whatever projects, they are really fast, approaching us very fast. So that, having these diverse partnerships, diverse allies really help us, to see what is coming towards us, right? So when you just having a really good relationship, collaboration with the local people, they might just alarm us, this is something is going to happen. Or when you have a good relationship with the media, they would alarm us. So we just found that this diverse partnership would be really helpful to conservation organizations like us.
Thank you, Baiera, and thank you, Kustub, for the comment and question. So we have one final question from Nikki, and she's just comments saying, amazing story. Thank you for sharing. And she's sorry for the loss of your colleague, which was not in vain. And my question is about local people. Do you have a collective vision for long-term conservation and development in the landscape? And do you or other organizations help facilitate this in Tost?
Yes, we, as an organization here in Mongolia, we develop our programs for 5 years. So in each 5 years, we evaluate what have been achieved, and then for the next 5 years, what's going to happen. So all those works. Of course, Snow Leopard Trust helps us, you know, and then also we are the part of, you know, family of Snow Leopard organizations. As you know, Mongolia is as being one of the snow leopard countries. We also have the part of global snow leopard ecosystem protection program, which, you know, which brings up all these, you know, strategies, how to move forward for snow leopard conservation. So that really helps us, you know, individual organizations. We are really grateful that we have this program, which is running, you know, the government level, which Dr. Kostyub Sharma is leading. So that kind of program, through these kind of initiatives, it's important to be, you know, engaged to develop our own strategies.
And I think she's also asking about like local people involved in the management plan and vision of Tost.
Yeah, so yeah, sorry, I missed that part.
No,
so
sorry.
See, these local people have, because they have their own areas of responsibilities, which is the snow leopard habitat. So they also have the management plan on their own level. So they also create their strategy on local level.
Great, thank you, Baiera. And there's some more comments coming in. And Tony actually is writing that he helps develop SMART. So it was a trick question before about SMART tools. And he'll hopefully be working closely with Puji and working with your team to move that
That's
ahead.
Right.
But before we end, thank you everyone for the great questions and for Baiera and Charu. I just have a question because you know, we set this banner about this webinar of hope, and I just wanted to ask you both, what were your hopes for Tost in the near future? And if you had any final comments before we closed the webinar.
Would it be in two words?
As short or as long as you feel.
Thriving snow leopards and local people in Tost.
Thanks, Baiera. And Charu, any final, you know, messages of hope for related to Tost or wider snow leopard conservation?
I mean, Justine, Tost is such a wonderful example of, you know, like Baiera said, so many different stakeholders coming together and in support, not just of snow leopards, but in support of local communities. And I think that the model of management that Tost has now adopted, which is like which is a co-managed area, which is not just a government-managed protected area, but that local communities themselves are on the board of management, and responsible for their regions, etc. I think it's relevant to the earlier question about their vision, and you know, through this entire process and through these mechanisms, I think their vision is getting realized. And I think so it's a vision for conservation, it's a vision for local communities, and as long as we can, you know, continue to support this joint vision for snow leopards and local communities in the landscape, I think the whole idea is to just support this and strengthen this kind of ownership of and management of the region, both for wildlife as well as for local livelihoods. And I think that itself, that this whole process, where it started and where it is today, I think just fills me up with a huge amount of hope. So, and hope everybody shares that as well.
Thank you both, and thank you for sharing so much about it today. Not only the hopes, but also the challenges. You provided a very a real, you know, true story about how it's not always so, you know, roses, and how we have to keep fighting and the challenges we face with conservation. So thank you both. But I think it does leave us with a sense of hope that, you know, with change, with constant over time, then over the long term, we can see some change to these ever emerging threats. And thanks to everyone for joining. All our best wishes and hope and for a successful 2021. We look forward to hearing and seeing you in the new year, and feel free to get in touch with our speakers or get in touch with Raki and others over this next period. We really appreciated everyone's support over this last year to all of SLN's events and activities. So thank you very much. And a very special thank you to Baiera and Charu for joining us. Thank you. It was such a beautiful presentation on Baiera, and such great questions from the audience. Thank you.